This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only.
Today on the show, Lidge and I are very pleased to be talking with Jolie Balaz, who is coming to us from something like 10 and a half hours north of Boston. Where is that exactly?
The province is New Brunswick in eastern Canada, and it's just connected to the right of Maine, northeast of Boston, about 10 hours.
That's still hard for me to get my brain wrapped around, that there's something to the right of Maine. When I think of the right of Maine, I just think of the ocean, the wide open ocean.
No, there's a little tiny beautiful piece of Canada sitting right there.
Oh, nice. So, Jolie, you are doing something really important with SolarCoins. And can you tell us about that today?
The community that I live in is approximately 60 kilometers north of the capital city in New Brunswick. So I travel to work. I work in Fredericton, but I live here. I went to high school here. I graduated in 87. As I started to discover Bitcoin and recognize the transformational nature of it, I immediately saw that the kids in high school today are clearly going to be the ones who drive it into the future, and we need to make an attempt to get them aware of this now, to get them ahead of the curve instead of lagging behind, as usually is the case with many rural communities nowadays. It seems to be getting worse and worse every year, so I decided to attempt to get that done and get donations from the community to try to get them familiar. That's how it started.
What would a Bitcoin scholarship look like?
Well, I set up an address with a separate wallet strictly for that, and it's public, so I explained that the transactions can be seen there. I just really want to get one Bitcoin is what the ideal goal is. But that's enough to hand off to someone to be of value while still, addressing the fun nature of the future of cryptocurrency, right? So initially, it's just a very small goal of that amount. If it is one Bitcoin or less, I intend to just give the entire award to the valedictorian / Governor General Award winner, whoever that may be. Mm-hmm. If by some miracle I get more than that, I've worked out a way to just give it to the top student in each class that was offered, which I think would kind of give a lot of people motivation to at least become the best in the knowledge area that they're good at.
Are you going to be accepting SolarCoins or Bitcoins for this scholarship? What are you looking for people to send your way?
The SolarCoin one is going to be a little bit more lax in terms of academic achievement. I just intend to give whatever the amount in there and just divide that equally amongst all the students who graduate, because I think that those are another important lesson, and that currency was launched in January, and we can discuss that more if you like.
Yeah, please tell us more about SolarCoins. What are SolarCoins? How do they work?
One SolarCoin is to represent 1 megawatt hour of energy produced through solar generation. The goal is to incentivize and increase solar power generation worldwide. The structure of the coin is also fairly interesting. It's a pre-mined coin. The developers obviously put a lot of thought and strategy into the design of the coin, and you can see that as you start to dig a little deeper into how it's structured. So as I read a lot about the idea of the coin and the structure of the coin and researched some of the people behind the team of the SolarCoin Foundation who were developing it, I fell in love. So
now, did you fall in love with it because of the concept or because you really like the idea of sunshine up there in cold Canada?
I fell in love with the concept because it sort of met two of my passions, the most recent passion being the Bitcoin protocol and everything that represents beyond just currency. Mm-hmm. And that part of it was tied to my previous real life experience in finance and investments and that kind of thing. So, the Bitcoin and my past sort of aligned on the currency economy front. But at the same time, for a number of years, I've been just deeply concerned about the issues surrounding climate change. And up until a year ago, or even, less than that, I was, kind of the opinion that there was no hope, and that was just not pleasant. We really need to stop our carbon emissions and switch things around, or we're going to be in trouble. So I have that passion as well as a side thing. So when there's a SolarCoin, when I read what they were attempting to do and how it really could work if it was adopted, combined with the economic side of it, the planets aligned, and those were the main reasons why I just finally felt this was a coin that that made perfect sense to me given my background and ideas.
So as far as the SolarCoin incentivizing people to use solar energy, can you give us some more specifics about that?
Sure. Well, a little bit more than 99% of the total coins are pre-mined, and they are parked in a safe, secure location. And those will only be given out over the next 40 years to people who can verify that they've generated solar electricity. I won't get into all the details surrounding the verification. There's plenty of work going on in that front right now, but the idea is that those will, over those years, start to be given out to these people who produce solar power. Now, tie into that a value of a currency and, the backing of a unit such as this, providing more stability to value, it will also incentivize people to just do it more and more and more. The idea being that solar energy becomes the predominant method of creating energy for the planet and minimizing the use of oil and gas naturally as a result, at which point it ties into production in the future too. Because as we start to increase our renewable energy resources and they get larger and larger, there's an economy tied to that. We have increased production in technology. The cost of solar will continue to go down. And it just sort of has a compounding Moore's Law effect to it in terms of technology generation over the next even just 10 or 15 years.
That's so cool. So the concept is essentially that the coins, the solar coins, have been pre-mined so that there's sort of a pool that are created, and then they are sort of secondarily mined over the next 40 years by people producing, what did you say, it was 1 megawatt hour of solar energy equals one solar coin?
Exactly. And that equivalency stays consistent throughout the life of the coin. So that's an important point to remember. I find a lot of people, when I discuss Bitcoin, they say, well, what is that backed by? And I think, today even people think that money is backed by gold, and it hasn't been for 40 years. People just feel comfortable with the idea that currency is backed by something. And in this particular case, well, guess what it is? It's backed by a megawatt hour of solar energy produced. So from a marketing standpoint, it's a lot easier to explain to people when they kind of get that light bulb moment there.
Now, so what does that mean for the anticipated value of SolarCoin? Does it start out being worth a particular amount now, where 1 megawatt energy of solar power is worth something that might be worth more or less in the future?
There is a target value for the coin that they've identified to be $20 to $30 per solar coin. Now, this is just my opinion, just from researching it, but I think it's important to discuss the small element of the public mining, because that does come into play, I think, to the value of the coin 5 years out. So if you'll permit me, I'd like to just touch on that a little bit.
Sure.
So there's only going to be 0.1% of all of the coins that are publicly mined. So that amounts to 105 million coins. But the structure of the mining deteriorates quite rapidly. By year 5, I think I read that 95% of the publicly mined coins will be done. So you've got the public mining, which is a very, very small portion of the total pool, being accelerated in those first few years. And that will, I think, initiate a value that can be sustained during that period until the generation pool begins to catch up and overtake the release of coins from the mining side. So, I mean, you want to see this natural decrease of one while the other one catches up and grows larger.
Oh, very interesting.
That in and of itself, so when the mining is done and the generation pool takes over, you've got this stability that, while it will be initially volatile, I think in the first 1 or 2 years for sure, it's built into the structure of the coin to promote stability over time, which is a really important thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As far as the usefulness of the solar coin, are people imagining that it's going to be valued solarly on trading on Cryptsy and in different exchanges, or that it's going to be useful as a medium of exchange in the solar industry, so that you could perhaps buy solar panels using SolarCoin one day?
Right. Certainly both.
Nice.
I mean, my first brief thoughts when I initially started to look into it was, well, could I use these things to pay my $200 power bill every month? Because that would be just fantastic. The idea is there that it will be potentially used for transactions, and I could see solar installation type companies accepting it. It's got to achieve that value first, and I think that's really where the cryptocurrency side of it comes into play in the initial year or two with, the cryptsy and the hype and all of that. We've got to get up to a value that can then become stable from then on. So we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, it's just a matter of time to see who will come out the winners or not.
And just so our listeners know, you have a background in finance, right?
I do. Yes, I do.
So I'd like to think that you know what you're talking about when it comes to money and finance. Well, what is your background in finance?
Well, I have my MBA in finance, but I worked at a pension fund for a number of years, and I also am a CFA charter holder. Chartered Financial Analyst is what it stands for, and it's a fairly important designation to have if you're in investment banking or institutional investment management.
Wow, Impressive.
From your perspective, have you ever seen anything as exciting as all these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and alt currencies in the world of finance?
Never. I think it's just transformational. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
So what do you think about the idea that if Bitcoin doesn't do well because of federal regulations or the Internal Revenue Service or the equivalent in other countries, that's not the end of digital currencies, right?
It most certainly isn't. I think there's a power ingrained in the idea that even we haven't quite recognized that potential yet, and we're involved in it and true believers, right? It's just going to overwhelm us. I really believe that.
I'm overwhelmed daily by Bitcoin.
I am too. I feel like I've had an awakening over the past few months, and it's just so much better than feeling hopeless and just waiting for an apocalypse. This is a much better way to be.
I completely agree. Well, Jolie, it has been our great pleasure to talk with you and to hear what you have to say about the scholarship. And maybe you could tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you, and most importantly, how they can donate Bitcoin or SolarCoin, or I guess at this point you would accept any digital currency that could go into the pool.
No, I really would only accept Bitcoin or SolarCoin at this point. Not because I don't like any of the other ones. I just don't want the logistical hassle when it comes time for June when I have to present them. So
transferring barbecue coins into wizard
no,
coins and back to Philosopher's Stone. Okay, I don't blame you.
The best way to get a hold of me would be actually through the Facebook group page it's called the CNBA Bitcoin Scholarship Fund. Just go there, like the page, and the addresses for each of the scholarship are right there. And I would love some donations. I'd like to get the Bitcoin one up to 1 Bitcoin before June. So any help will be much, much appreciated.
Okay, and that's CNBA, that's Charlie Nancy Beta Alpha?
Exactly. Central New Brunswick Academy is what it stands for.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. And for our listeners, we'll have those notes in our show notes at bitcoinsandsgravy.com/episode 9. So you can look for these links there.
Hey, Jolie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Lidge and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jolie. And thank you from all the students that are going to be receiving these scholarships as well. I'm sure they're going to really appreciate it.
I think they will someday for sure.
So, Jolie, do you have any final words for our listeners about the scholarship and about SolarCoins?
There was one thing I forgot to mention, which I think is kind of neat.
Okay.
There's the idea on our SolarCoin forum right now that the smallest unit of a SolarCoin should be labeled the photon.
Oh, excellent. I like the idea. Now, would that be a particle or a wave?
I don't know.
Nice.
We'll have to ask the Big Bang Theory that one.
So photon is to SolarCoins as Satoshi is to Bitcoin. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Photons. I love it.
I do too. Oh, and something I really wanted to mention to you guys and to the viewers is that there's a paper that was published by a couple of the people behind SolarCoin, Nick Gogerty and Joseph Zitoli. It's called DECO, an electricity-backed currency proposal. And they published that paper in 2011, and it really does a wonderful job of explaining the role of currency and how the role of backing a currency with something like a megawatt hour of electricity really lends to the production and utility value of the currency growing with GDP over time. So to clarify what I mean, I'll just read directly from the article itself.
Okay, great.
Electricity delivering assets can hold their economic value more effectively than gold or debt due to price stability and resistance to devaluation from overissuance. The currency concept advocates a portfolio of diversified electricity delivering assets that offers more social benefits than gold and retains monetary value better than government debt. And that's kind of bringing the two things together. into one currency that's really designed with the future in mind. The design that they put in place is clearly structured so that there is stability to that price. And again, reading that paper that they issued will help anyone get a better understanding of what I'm trying to explain here. Another really important thing that I forgot to mention, and I will now because I think it's part of the future again, is the generation pool that houses the 99.4% of the coins that are going to be distributed out to validated solar generators. There is a potential that pool could be housed on something similar to Ethereum. So you could have, the currency transaction side of SolarCoin on the Bitcoin protocol doing what it's meant to do with the public ledger. Then you could also have its sister component on the generation side that becomes a decentralized validating mechanism for the issuance of the coins. You marry those two together, and that's a beautiful thing.
It's official. You're blowing my mind. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Jolie.
Thank you.
All views and opinions expressed are the views and opinions of the individuals and sponsors presenting them, and not the LTB network. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, episode 15. On today's show, Lidge and I feel very privileged to be speaking with Joseph Zitoli, one of the founding members of the SolarCoin project. Lidge and I once again humble ourselves as students of technology as we listen to Mr. Zitoli talk about SolarCoin, solar energy, and the truly amazing things to come here in the dawn of the age of digital currencies. Hey, forget about to the moon for a minute, folks. I say to the sun.
And after that, we come back and also meet up with Alan Walker of CoinCPA.com for a look at the future of accounting. CoinCPA is a powerhouse tool that allows you to track your balances for dozens of currencies, online and offline wallets, exchanges, mining pools, and it even shows you the current US dollar value for each. Managing your portfolio has never been easier.
So stay right here for more Bitcoins and Gravy. And remember to call us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline with your comments or questions at 615-208-5198, or simply click on the hotline link from your mobile phone when you visit bitcoinsandgravy.com. Or you can email us at howdy@bitcoinsandgravy.com. That's howdy@bitcoinsandgravy.com. So today on the show, Lidge and I are very pleased to have Joseph Zitoli, one of the founding members of SolarCoin. Is that right, Joseph?
Correct.
Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, Joseph. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show. So, Joseph, can you tell us how you first got involved in SolarCoin?
Yeah, what is it?
Sure. What is it? We have to step back a little bit. In 2011, I co-authored a paper with Nick Gogerty, who's also the co-founder of SolarCoin, called DECO, an electricity-backed currency proposal. And DECO, D-E-K-O, stands for Delivered Kilowatt Hour. And what we were looking for there is other alternatives to currency beyond, let's say, gold or fiat-based currency, which is backed by debt. And what you're looking for is an aspect of something of value that is true and good. And what we mean by that, truth by the scientific method, you can objectively test it via physics. And goodness, you're looking at increasing the standard of living of humanity without harming the planet. And a couple of things fit that. You could base it on information, but information is a little harder to have all aspects of information be completely objective. Or you could base it on energy. Energy has standardization based upon proof of work, namely the kilowatt hour, megawatt hour. Mm-hmm. And also you have a goodness aspect of increasing the standard of living. And we show in the paper, in the DECO paper, of the correlation between electricity or power usage and standard of living. And with renewable energy specifically, it harms the planet less than non-renewable.
Okay, so energy use and standard of living, that's the correlation, is that if it's renewable energy, it's good for the earth? Or is there some correlation wherein less energy used is a higher standard of living, or vice versa?
Well, it's looking at basically the advancement of societies. It's called the Human Development Index. And basically, you can see that countries that are higher on the Human Development Index have a higher use of energy, power usage. What we're looking to advance that in terms of renewable energy, because what's in that calculation, that Human Development Index, are non-renewables, such as coal, natural gas, oil. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for the migration of incentivizing that over to renewable.
And what is your background in tech or your background in energy?
My undergraduate is in mechanical engineering. Mm-hmm. I worked for a while as an engineer for an infrared technology company that heated glass systems. And then I got a master's in finance and risk management in the banking sector. And then I also have the Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst designation. And that's how I met Nick Gogerty via that organization, in which we were looking at alternative currencies. That's my background in terms of basically work and education related. And then I started getting involved in not only currencies, but the digital currencies in Bitcoin, and namely the blockchain technology around 2012, 2013. It gave a way in order to implement the SolarCoin vision, because we've developed the definition of what SolarCoin, what we want it to be in terms of an electricity-backed currency, but the blockchain gives us the means now. So if you look at this simple analogy, think of an analogy of the different states of water, okay? Mm-hmm. As an ice form, you could compare that to gold. Gold is solid, it's objective, it's durable, but it doesn't increase the standard of living of humanity. Gold has value because of the belief in it, okay? At the other end of the spectrum, you have steam. That's sort of analogy to debt-backed currencies. There's a risk of overissuance, that they can be devalued, and also the interest that is charged on them. What you're looking for is somewhere in between, the liquid state of water, in which that's the realm where life exists. And what you're looking for a balance is something that has truth aspect and also the goodness that I spoke about before. And that's where you're talking about flow. And, life values flow in that sense, in terms of, the liquid state. And a renewable energy backed currency fits that aspect of definition of truth and goodness. Again, the SolarCoin is standardized on 1 megawatt hour. You could talk to resources around the globe, which I have in Cyprus, Greece, and Australia. It's all standardized on 1 megawatt hour. They understand that, okay? So that's the scientific method. Mm-hmm. Also, they understand the renewable aspect of it, in which you can have both large and small installations of solar panels receive SolarCoin. Okay, there is a standardization calculation in which resources can verify with a certain level of tolerance how much solar coins could be granted for a certain facility. Let me give you an example, okay?
Okay.
Let's say you have a 10 kilowatt nameplate capacity, so an installation of photovoltaic panels. With a simple calculation, about 15%, you take the nameplate capacity, multiply, let's say 15%, 24 hours a day, and the number of days, you can get a certain tolerance of how many solar coins should be granted. So for 10 kilowatts, 15% over a year, that's about 13 solar coins. So if someone would ask for 300 solar coins with a 10 kilowatt nameplate capacity, something is not right there. In addition, there is a calculator, an online calculator called PV Watts, put out by the Renewable Energy Lab, that makes that calculation a little bit more accurate, in the sense that with each grant, we have a message, which in that contains the country of the generation facility, the zip code, the nameplate capacity, and the number of days of the grant, okay, of the claim. So from there, someone independently can verify that. And we're working on automating that process such that the tolerance is more accurate.
So wait, are you suggesting that different regions will have a different amount of solar coin available to them?
Well, based on solar irradiation. So for example, let's say if you are in northern Canada versus, let's say, southern Florida or, areas that are closer to the equator, the solar irradiation based upon latitudes is different. Okay.
Right.
So for each, let's say, square meter or square foot, if you're closer to the equator, it has a higher solar radiation than if you're further north of the equator.
So they would get more SolarCoin available because there's just simply more solar power generated or potential for generating.
Correct.
So yet another reason to live in the sunshine belt.
Well, yeah, true. The northern countries could, buy SolarCoin. They could, have services based upon accepting SolarCoin. There's a couple of, innovative programs we're working on. What we're really trying to do is grow the economy because the currency is only as valuable as the number of participants. We're looking to have easier tools, a simpler website, and wallets in order to facilitate the transfer of SolarCoin and grow the number of grants. That's both large and small installations. You can have a typical home, which is basically 10 kilowatt nameplate capacity or smaller, and then you have very large ones. You can have solar farms that are megawatt, even gigawatt nameplate capacity. Another innovative program, which our community has suggested, is for solar panel manufacturers to accept a discount by accepting SolarCoin for a certain portion of the financing of solar panels, which is interesting.
You mentioned Nick Gogerty. Can you tell us a little bit about his background?
Sure. Nick has a background in finance as well, but I think he studied anthropology. He also has a book coming out called The Nature of Value, in which he looks at currency from a scientific perspective. It's by Columbia University Press. In addition, he has his own blog, and he's written many papers on currency theory. Okay. He is both co-author of the Deco paper, which I spoke about before, and also the co-founder of SolarCoin. In addition, that Deco paper was presented at the Tesla conference in Split, Croatia, July 2012. There was a conference in Split, Croatia, in which they brought, I guess, world scholars to talk about energy-backed currency named after Nikola Tesla.
I was hoping you were going to bring up Tesla. I wanted to ask you about him.
We presented the paper there. A lot of people who've been working on energy-backed currencies, at least what we were able to basically conclude from that conference is the standardization based upon the kilowatt hour, the megawatt hour, because, again, that is a proof of work based upon physics versus a proof of work from, let's say, Bitcoin, which is solving, let's say, the mathematical puzzles. It's a different mechanism as a proof of work. So a simple way to think about is we're replacing, let's say, the CPUs, GPUs in Bitcoin in order to solve these mathematical puzzles with solar panels as the proof of work.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but SolarCoin is going to start out relying on CPUs and GPUs in order to be mined initially. Is that correct?
Yes, let me talk about that. So basically, the project details of SolarCoin, there are 3 pools of SolarCoin. There's 105 million dedicated to the traditional mining. The reason for that is you need a network in order to support SolarCoin. Second, there is a Genesis pool of 500 million that is dedicated to charities, volunteers, and the operations of the SolarCoin Foundation for the next 40 years. And then finally, there's the large generator pool, which I like to be called, they are pre-generated coins. In terms of cryptocurrencies, they're called pre-mined. But basically, they're in a secure location, and there's restrictions on their release based upon what I spoke about before, nameplate capacity. A very small amount is being automated such that at any one point in time, there's only a small amount that can be granted out. There is a 5% restriction on the Genesis pool, what I spoke about before, the 500 million, and that's to prevent any amount of, let's say, dumping of the coin. So basically 5% of the overall issuance is only allowed in the Genesis pool. It's restricted. And right now we only have about 17 million outstanding. Okay. So that's how that works.
All right. Well, so let me jump back to something you said about regional restrictions again. Is this going to de-incentivize those who do live in the cold north and need to use most of that energy to stay warm? For example, we already have an energy distribution in the world wherein the hot and sunny desert locations have had the largest supply of oil, and are they going to be replaced with the largest supply of solar energy?
That's a good question. From a physics perspective, obviously they have a competitive advantage. However, with innovations in Germany and also greater efficiencies of solar panel, that the movement of countries north of the equator you can have a competitive environment. Obviously, if you're at the North Pole, that's, a different story. But the northern countries can participate in SolarCoin via, a marketplace, via purchase of the SolarCoin. There could be aspects of granting as well from the Genesis pool in order to have some level of competition there. But the overall objective of SolarCoin is to incentivize solar electricity generation over the next 40 years.
You mentioned some technology in Germany. I read an article a few years ago about the difference between the energy that's collected by photovoltaic cells and the radiation that's collected using some kind of technology that's not exactly the same as photovoltaic cells. Is that a factor in the SolarCoin equation?
Yeah, let me jump in and add more to that, John. I was watching with my daughter an episode of Cosmos just last night, I think it was.
Okay.
And they were talking about plants using photosynthesis as the ultimate energy source of solar energy coming in. Is SolarCoin going to be very focused on sort of older and existing technology in collecting solar energy, or is it very open to all renewable sources of energy?
Yes. That's the most popular question we get in terms of frequently asked questions. Why just solar? Why not other renewables? So there were a lot of questions. Let me try to break that down one at a time. If we look at the whole spectrum of renewables, you have, let's say, hydro, geothermal, biomass, wind. They are mostly larger installations, industrial installations. And what we were trying to engineer is something that is equitable both for large and small installations. I think it's very unlikely someone's going to have a hydroelectric plant in their backyard.
Dang it, I was going to work on that.
In addition, the breakdown, solar is the largest, source of renewable energy. And solar can be broken down into a couple of components. You have the photovoltaic, you have solar thermal, you have Stirling engines, in which it is, let's say, a parabolic dish that focuses solar light on a heat engine. And that's how it generates electricity.
Oh, yeah, that was like the time we cooked chocolate chip cookies with tinfoil on the inside of a pizza box.
Same principle. What has to be done is you have to verify via third party the electricity generated. So some things that are currently out of scope, let's say, would be, heating your water for your house, because it's based on the 1 megawatt standard. So there has to be a way of objectively proving and verifying that 1 megawatt hour of solar electricity has been generated. It could be, again, a photovoltaic, solar thermal. It could even be via these plants if there's a solar inverter on there that objectively measures that solar electricity. So it's sort of, agnostic to the approach, but as long as it's solar, that's what we're standardizing on, because that's the objective to incentivize solar electricity.
All sources of energy on this planet come from the sun anyway.
You could have that argument. But again, going back to what I mentioned before about the verification of it, you want the community to have the capability to objectively verify these claims. It's a way of, self-auditing the granting aspect of it. And that is done by, again, the nameplate capacity, the location in the country and zip code, and the number of days the claim of the grant is for. That's a little bit more challenging to do with hydro, with geothermal, biomass, and wind, because you have these standard irradiation maps, these calculators that exist to provide a level of tolerance of trust. And that's why it's standardized on solar.
Joseph, I'd like to ask a question that some of our listeners with an investment mindset might be curious about. What sorts of things do you see happening to the price and value of SolarCoin down the road? For example, if it's tied directly to 1 megawatt of energy and it becomes easier and easier for people to create 1 megawatt of energy, does that mean SolarCoin is going to be an investment that's likely to increase in value, decrease in value? Do you have any thoughts on that sort of thing?
Initially, SolarCoin, the incentive aspect is the delta between electricity generation from conventional methods, whether it's coal or natural gas, versus renewable. So what you have is that differential that exists right now. It's more expensive to generate, electricity from solar means than, let's say, coal. That will reduce in time as the technology improves, as there's a greater proliferation. And it can be realized that SolarCoin would be standardized on how much a megawatt hour costs to generate versus the delta between the two. It can get to that level, but initially it's the incentive aspect that we're after, because right now a very small portion of the world's electricity is generated from solar. And so this 40-year project is to incentivize that, to get it to a level that is a good percentage of global electricity production.
I see. Are you finding in the community, in the solar community, a lot of agreement on some of these points that you're making?
Yes, absolutely. And that's where a lot of the innovation is coming from, whether it's innovative ways of incentivizing solar electricity generation. As I mentioned before, that having solar panel manufacturers accept a certain payment in SolarCoin, whether it's innovations on different methods of solar electricity. So you have basically institutions like the International Solar Energy Society in Germany and also the American Solar Energy Society. We're working with them as a means of basically getting the message out of the SolarCoin mission in order to incentivize global solar electricity generation.
I see. You know, historically, it seems like the coal industry, natural gas, timber industry have done certain things to slow down certain technologies that would otherwise have done really well. For instance, it's still illegal to grow hemp in the United States, which of course is ridiculous, right? But what roadblocks have you found from some of the other energy giants?
Well, there hasn't been much to date. I think people understand that just with the passage of time, fossil fuel generation will become depleted, okay? Just because, we'll run out of it. It may be some time, so you need bridge technology in order to get you there. In addition, we have to combat climate change. The issue here is not only CO2, it's heat. Okay, when you add unnecessary heat to the environment via laws of thermodynamics, you have accelerated flow, and that manifests in terms of hurricanes, tornadoes, so forth. Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we start increasing the temperature of the planet, you will start seeing more volatile weather. A good analogy would be, well, what if your body temperature was only 2 degrees more? Is that a big deal? I don't think you would be able to operate efficiently.
Right.
Because, a lot of your biochemistry is determined upon having a equilibrium temperature. So you have to combat it with methodology that we are in harmony with the energy source that is sustaining your life, right? Mm-hmm. And that's solar.
Well, yeah, John brings that up often here in the studio, as far as doing the radio show, getting the AC turned back on.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. If you think about that, right? If you just look at it from a fossil fuel perspective, mm-hmm. Planet's heating up and you need to cool down your house. Well, you turn up the air conditioner. Okay, by turning up the air conditioner, you need more electricity. You have to burn more coal that heats up the environment more, and you have this positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah. Right.
And what has been shown is that countries that use solar electricity as a method of cooling, you sort of basically mitigate those spikes in electricity demand when it's hot weather, because the source you're using to cool your house is the same source you're using to generate the electricity.
I worry that we still have politicians that are debating whether or not global warming is real. Do you think there's any political movement that's standing in the way of solar?
So basically, what I can tell you, what is true, is based upon the second law of thermodynamics. And that is, in layman's terms, heat flows from hot to cold, okay? Mm-hmm. And from that principle, what you can state is that as we heat up the planet more, we are accelerating that flow of hot to cold, okay? And from there, that manifests in cooling mechanisms of hurricanes and tornadoes, things like that. So one could debate whether it's man-made or natural, but our man-made energy production is adding additional heat to the environment. And that additional heat is accelerating the flow of heat from hot to cold. So that's really not subject to debate, that portion, the acceleration aspect. But you will have, pushback, doubt, whether we need renewable energy. I think with the passage of time, as you get more volatile weather, people become more convinced that something needs to be done.
Sure, absolutely. Or for example, as energy is provided by solar panels and people find they have to breathe less exhaust, from combustion engines and that sort of thing, or coal fumes, or the quality of living may just simply go up.
Sure, electric cars, would be a great incentive for it as well.
Yeah, go sit next to an entire traffic jam of electric cars waiting at a stoplight and listen to see what you hear versus doing the same thing with gas engine cars.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the SolarCoin, the currency. I think we learned earlier that the smallest level of SolarCoin might be referred to as the photon. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's the equivalent of a Satoshi. I must give a lot of credit to the community of all the innovation they're coming up with for SolarCoin. The equivalent of Satoshi for Bitcoin, they want to call it the photon.
Okay, that's great. And we tried to ask last time, but now we have a real expert on the line. Is it a particle or is it a wave? That's what we want to know.
We still don't know yet. It is a mystery. It's a mystery of physics.
And then so how big is the neutrino going to be?
Not sure yet. We'll just keep it at the photon level. One other area of innovation I will say is the community has decided that the section symbol, it looks like a double S, it's used in legal papers, is going to be the symbol of SolarCoin. So instead of, let's say, the equivalent of the dollar sign, the section symbol, which you can look up, it's sort of a double S, looks like an S with a circle in the middle, will be the symbol for SolarCoin. That's another community innovation. I would just like to articulate that the SolarCoin Foundation, we are looking to grow the economy of participants in SolarCoin mission via a number of grants we're sending out to solar generation facilities, having simpler ways of basically granting SolarCoin and also simplifying our website. It's a long-term mission, and we're in for the incredible journey.
Yeah, you said, 40 years is the projected length of this?
Yeah.
Well,
that's
I
cool.
I may have to learn how SolarCoin does on the other side with you. I'll be standing next to all of you guys, looking down from the sun.
Hey, you'll be here, Lidge. Don't worry. For our listeners who would like to invest in solar coins, can you tell them how they can get solar coins?
Sure. There's two primary ways right now. You can go to exchanges. Allcrypt is one of them. That is an exchange that you can exchange SolarCoin with Bitcoin.
Okay.
There are a few others you could find on our website. In addition, you could mine SolarCoin, but really the incentive is what we want to promote is claiming SolarCoin via the generation of solar electricity. And that can be done via our website as well, solarcoin.org.
Solarcoin.org. And how else can our listeners find you if they'd like to?
We have a forum. We also have a Wikipedia. We are also on LinkedIn, and we're also on Facebook.
All right. Well, hey, Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show. This was great.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joseph.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.
This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. All views and opinions expressed are the views and opinions of the individuals and sponsors presenting them, and not the LTB network. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, episode 17. So today we welcome Nick Gogerty, the founder of SolarCoin and principal of value creation consulting firm Thoughtful Capital Group. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Nick, it's a pleasure to have you here on Bitcoins and Gravy with us.
So, Nick, where would you like to start? I know that you've written a book entitled The Nature of Value. That's how to invest in the adaptive economy. Can you tell us what you mean by the adaptive economy and how does that fit into SolarCoin? I know you have an extensive background in investing and in economy. How does all of this fit into SolarCoin?
The book, The Nature of Value, deals with the economy and the creation of economic value as an adaptive process. And that process works a lot like nature. I spent about, personally, 25 years investing and working with different groups, including the world's largest banks and hedge funds. And then 4 years of that research boiled down to that book. Part of that book deals with money and how money works, and that kind of deals with just a solar coin and the creation of that. Mm-hmm. Basically, the thinking behind SolarCoin is that a currency or a form of money effectively is, and this is going to sound a little strange, but it's really a social protocol. Money is a way for all of us to exchange efficiently value. And so as a social protocol, the more people that agree to and accept a form of money, whether it be dollars, gold, Bitcoin, solar coins, etc., the more utility or the more value that that form of money or that currency has. And that's part of the research that came out of the book and part of my work involved in that. My background in foreign currency goes all the way back to the age of 17 when I was trading Japanese yen futures. That was back in 1987. So being a proprietary trader for one of the world's largest banks in London, which is kind of the Forex headquarters of the world, and having worked with various hedge funds here in the States. So a bit of background in money and some other things. And of course, the book is being put out by Columbia University, same place that Warren Buffett went to school, and the book is on value. So I've got a bit of a background in economics and money.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I think we should begin by maybe bragging about you a little bit. You worked with the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, $150 billion, being a quantitative Forex analyst for Banque Nationale de Paris, $2 trillion balance sheet, founding software startup and strategic risk firms, chief analyst at Starlab, a deep future multidisciplinary science research institute. And I think there was something there that had to do with like research into time machines or something like that. Black holes and time machines.
Exactly. At one point, the institute was modeled on the MIT Media Lab and had some people from the MIT Media Lab on board. And there was a theoretical physicist who was researching some of those things, among some more, let's say, what we call applied science areas, material sciences, life sciences, media studies. I was overseeing 3 different schools of artificial intelligence at one point in terms of research. So, wow, some interesting stuff. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. And building risk models for global banks. I wrote that you had done that. That's pretty heavy stuff, man. So, your background in finance and investing, it seems like anybody who's interested in investing in SolarCoin, they might want to listen to you.
Well, I mean, ultimately, everyone has to listen to themselves and look around at what they think is correct, what they think is true, and is going to be the most interesting. But feel free to, read what I have to say, and if you agree with the arguments, it could be very interesting.
Well, so tell us more about SolarCoin and why we should be interested in investing in it.
Sure. The original idea came from a white paper that I drafted with a co-author, Joe Zitoli, who you've interviewed earlier. Mm-hmm. And in that white paper, there was the concept of an energy-backed currency. And at the time, in 2011, that concept wasn't really feasible unless you had your own central bank to implement. Now, with the provability or the fact that Bitcoin technically works and that anyone can, in essence, issue a currency that is robust and transparent to, let's say, over-issuance or over-circulation, that premise became viable and potentially viable, an energy-backed currency. And then when looking into it, realized that it could be used to do good by backing solar energy with that currency and having that currency represent solar energy. The SolarCoin idea is, it's a subset of this energy-backed currency idea. And the realization was that the proof of work inherent in acting as a distribution mechanism and as a verification mechanism, Bitcoin, instead of using a purely cryptographic proof of work, why not use a real-world physical proof of work? And that real-world physical proof of work is the production or generation of solar energy. And so that's tied into SolarCoin. What ends up happening is anyone who produces 1 megawatt hour of solar energy in the world anywhere with a facility can claim one of these solar coins. And that's viewed as an equitable means of distributing the currency while also acting as an incentive to produce more solar energy globally. And there's a pre-mine that was set up that's anticipated to last at least 40 years to incent solar energy globally.
Can you tell us about how the SolarCoin mining differs from Bitcoin mining?
Sure. Most of it is similar. It's based off of a Litecoin fork, and that'll produce, roughly based on the design, about 105 million coins based on the half-life, etc. The rest of the coins were pre-mined, and so the only way to earn them, or the proof of work required to get those coins, is to submit a verifiable proof of production of solar energy. And so each verified 1 megawatt hour of energy produced entitles the claimant to a solar coin. And to date, we've had claimants from 11 countries. So it's rolling out pretty well. We just gave coins out to Cyprus and Austria over the weekend, and we look forward to adding more countries.
Help us understand a little bit. Script mining is going to get more and more difficult as more miners get involved. Is it similar to Bitcoin in that way? Will the mining become more difficult?
It's similar to Bitcoin in the fact that the algorithm and the effort required does something called retargeting so that it adjusts relative to the effort effort applied to it. So there's a constant issuance or rate of the coin.
Okay, and then when it's issued to people who are generating 1 megawatt of solar energy, it seems that 1 megawatt of solar energy is going to become easier and easier to generate as solar energy is adopted globally. How does that translate?
Yeah, and so here's what ends up happening. The mining effectively, because the half-life only lasts really for 4 years. So there's a 1-year half-life, and about 98% of the coins will be mined in the first 4.5 years. So what will end up happening is as the mining tapers off, with the exception of, let's say, transaction-based rewards, the real circulation mechanism will become the granting or the basically giving away of solar coins to people who produce solar electricity. Now, 1 megawatt hour of solar electricity is quite a bit. That's about enough to keep the average American home powered for a month. So what will end up happening is over time, like for example, last year, globally, they're estimated to have been about 160 million megawatt hours of electricity produced with solar energy. That would equate to 160 million potential claimable solar coins. That amount grows, or is anticipated to grow 20 to 30% per year over the next 20 to 30 years.
That's good news.
Yes, it is. And the neat thing about energy in almost any economic process, and part of the research from my book, The Nature of Value, is that any manufacturing process or production process gets cheaper as you make more of it. As more value flows through the economic system, it gets cheaper. And the cool thing about solar energy is every time we, globally, we produce or double the number of solar panels we produce, so we ship, let's say, an extra, 2x gigawatts of solar panels, the cost drops 22%. And that's kind of like a Moore's law of solar energy. And that's held up for about the last 20 or 30 years. So to produce a solar panel that would make a watt of power back in the 70s cost about $1,000. Now costs just under $1.
Wow.
So as an energy is a pure commodity, it's a price thing. And so what ends up happening is you've got this commodity that's dropping in price by a factor of 22% every time you ship 2x more.
It's quite different from gasoline.
Exactly. It gets more difficult. Well, parts of gasoline get cheaper with volume, but also it gets more difficult to find it as it gets in more, let's say, deeper rock formation, et cetera, with the exception of shale. But we won't get into the technical discussions on that. So the interesting thing about solar is it's one of these things where as you ship more solar panels, you produce more energy, it gets cheaper, so you sell more, and then as you sell more, it gets cheaper faster. So solar energy is going to be one of the most interesting things right now. Its cost is not fixed, it's a moving target, and so it's going to get cheaper, better, faster globally very quickly. And you're in a space, namely global energy, where you're talking about hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars of capital investment.
Wow.
SolarCoin acts as an incentive to help people make that choice. So let's say a solar coin, which right now has a de minimis value, but let's say as we grow the economy of solar coin holders, if it were to go to $10 per megawatt hour, all of a sudden the individual looking at putting solar panels on their roof or in a village or in an area might say, oh, wow, not only do we get the solar energy, but we get the benefit of claiming the solar coin as an incentive. That's pretty cool. Now, the value of a currency has two factors that drive it. One is speculative, and the other one is transactional. Economists call these the two utility functions of a currency. So the more people that hold or agree to or believe in a currency, the more transactional value it has. So, a dollar you can use almost globally because everyone agrees and they understand what a dollar value is. The dollar protocol is global. So the current holders, or the universe of Bitcoin holders, is estimated, I think, at about 500,000 to 2.5 million users, last report I saw. Now, the cool thing about that is that's pretty small in the internet world, and yet Bitcoin has what's called a market cap of, roughly $5 to $5.5 billion.
Right, almost 6 billion. I like to say 6 billion. It makes me feel better.
So, the cool thing is we are at what I call the CompuServe era of this technology or this protocol. CompuServe, if you remember back in the early 80s, everyone had email addresses that were numbers. It was clunky. Nobody used it. Nobody liked it. It was ugly. And that's really the great news for Bitcoin. The software is horrible. The wallets aren't user-friendly. Your aunt or uncle can't really figure it out, etc. And the great news is you got a $6 billion economy out there with something that engineering-wise works, but from a usability perspective is horrible. Once that usability gets solved or improved and we move from the CompuServe era and have what I'd call the AOL moment, you're going to be seeing an explosion into something really interesting for a lot of the alt currency spaces. And what I mean by that is you move from a $6 billion economy to, a 10 or 100x one. And whether that happens in the States or in some other country that adopts the currency and the protocols, that remains to be seen. What isn't known by a lot of people is the average fiat currency or government currency lasts 27 years. That equates to about a 3% failure rate. And I can give you guys the links on that. Now, we're used to the dollar and the pound and these other currencies that have been around for hundreds of years. But depending on what country you're in, if you have a fairly unstable currency and there's a problem, you might be very interested in an alt currency that is easily accessible, not as controllable and easy to park into a smartphone. And with $20 and $40 smartphones emerging in the next 2 or 3 years, things could get very, very interesting, both for Bitcoin and the altcoin space. And we think SolarCoin is going to ride along with it, and we hope to do a lot of good.
Mm-hmm. To focus on the value of SolarCoin in the future, wherein Bitcoin becomes harder and harder to create, and the value also goes up partly through that, I think. In SolarCoin, the value is going to rise or fluctuate with the speculative volume and also with the ability to trade in SolarCoin and use it for transactions down in the future, even though it's going to be easier to acquire.
Right.
Yeah, you have two sides of that equation, supply and demand. And the supply side is the granting and the mining. So the more people, the easier that it is to get SolarCoin by receiving a grant for generating electricity. Or if mining gets harder, that's the supply side. The demand side, which is like, what the heck is this thing worth? What's its value? Is going to be a mix of the speculative belief in how high or where it's going in the future and the utility function. How many people can you trade, swap, get something with this currency for? That's about it. It's, and we're very focused on ease of use. Growing that economy through ease of use. We're working on improving our communication and our messaging, et cetera, to try and get to the broader audience of people who aren't as familiar with, and frankly, don't even really need to know all of the plumbing under the coin.
Nick, one thing I'm still unclear about is how do the producers of solar energy, how do they prove to you that they've produced the solar energy? What is the proof that allows you then to award them solar coins?
Yeah, where's the proof of work?
Sure, exactly. The proof of work is a submitted verification from the energy meter in the home. So if you have a solar panel on your roof, it produces DC power, and that gets converted into AC power for your house. That conversion goes through something called an inverter. And the inverter also works like a meter, and it shows exactly how much has been produced. And a lot of these things are online. So our first grant, for example, to a woman named Lisa Shockley in Arizona, she just sent us a link to her inverter, and that feed was online. I think she was a Solar City customer. And you could look up online and say, oh, yeah, she has X number of solar panels on her roof, and you can verify that lots of ways. It ties out to what she says she claimed is on the power, and the inverter images and documentation all look like that was verified. We're working on developing software so that we can show those verifications to the community, so you'll be able to dial up, especially for the larger solar farms. You'll be able to dial up and say, well, how are these verified? Who verified and said this was okay, and what was the means?
I always want to just say, can't we just throw it onto the blockchain, timestamp it, and say, look, this is proof?
Well, what we're going to be doing is the grants will all go into the blockchain, and there'll be a transaction message that will tie out who the generator was in terms of what the source was, who made the claim, how much the claim was for. And that data is going to include, the latitude of where the person was at, what's called the nameplate capacity or the capacity for the solar generating roof. So it's going to be, hey, it's Bob Smith, 5 kilowatts on the roof between June and July in Arizona, and, claimed 5 SolarCoin, et cetera.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So for our listeners, say for a listener who's an absolute beginner at this, how would they go about right now getting some SolarCoin? Can you explain it, the basics?
Sure. There are a couple of ways. Obviously, you could buy it on an exchange, and those are listed on the site. As a claimant, let's say you have solar panels on your roof, just go to the website, download a wallet, and then fill out the form. submit the claim. There are about probably 10 or 15 pieces of data we need. And if you have solar on your roof, you're going to know pretty much what those pieces of data are in terms of, oh, here's the type of meter, here's how much you generated. The same way that you might look at your electricity bill and say, I used 50 kilowatt hours last month, you'll go and you'll be able to look either online, because you'll get it from whoever's probably providing or monitoring and managing your solar panel. You'll have a little report that'll say, oh, you generated 50 kilowatts. You just put that in the form. Usually takes 10 to 15 minutes to do the first time.
Okay. And so for somebody who might be a beginner, for example, they may have experience with solar panels and having solar energy, but this whole concept of SolarCoin and Bitcoin may be new to them. How would you describe what downloading a wallet means to them?
Sure. Just go to the home page. You'll download a piece of software that will sit on your computer. It'll sync up with the blockchain, or this large ledger of all the transactions.
And we should let people know that the faster your computer is, the faster it will do that. And if you have a really slow computer, it could take half of your day.
Yeah, and it just runs in the background, so you have to be patient. And then inside that piece of software, which is called your wallet, which is basically where you're going to store your coins, you'll get an address that will be the receiving address, and that's basically where you ask people to send your solar coins to. And take that address, put it with your other information into our website on the claim form. It's right up there next to the homepage. There's a button for claiming solar coins. And usually within 3 to 4 days, your solar coins will be sent out, and you'll get an email, and you're part of the process, and you're part of the SolarCoin community.
That's cool.
That's well explained. And I guess the form that they fill out then to verify the production of solar energy, that's also probably fairly straightforward.
Yes, it is. We're designing it to be as simple as possible. And right now, because we're in the early phases, we're learning how to make it as simple as possible and just building out the database to automate it more. So right now, for our volunteers in our community, it's a very manual process to do all that stuff, across 11 countries, as you can imagine.
So now what, do you have a term or a name for the people who have downloaded wallets, the volunteers in the SolarCoin community? Are they referred to as the planets, or, the flares? Or?
How about the sun gods?
We don't. One of the fun things about the whole process is the communities come up with some great names and concepts, and it's fun to watch the whole thing grow organically, and that's really fun. So from the name of the smallest unit being a photon instead of a Satoshi, someone refers to the currency now as solars, which kind of similar to dollars. So we'll have to see. Again, let people self-identify, and it'll be one of the great things when people come up with a nickname of how they want to be called. Okay,
so now did we explain to a beginner how they might go about mining some SolarCoin at this point?
Yeah, mining SolarCoin is really like any alternative currency. There are a couple ways to try and go about that. One is the wallet itself. If you download the piece of software from the website, it allows you to mine the SolarCoin. That being said, the difficulty now found in the currency is so high that really mining with a PC isn't worthwhile. It's not efficient. So, if you really want to get into mining, it's more for the techie people who probably are already miners.
Or the gaming folks that have GPUs sitting around?
Yeah, the GPUs, they can either use a GPU, or you go and join a mining pool and lease a mining rig, which I'm not going to try and explain that to people. I think they could probably find better explanations online to do it.
But there's a lot of information online about that.
Exactly. And it's just like any other coin from that aspect of the mining.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of great insight into SolarCoin and just the process of investing and the value of money.
I agree. And, I still like to think of the sun as the giant nuclear energy plant in the sky, right? Without the associated risks of radiation, without the associated risks of nuclear waste and Fukushima-style problems. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I'm actually working on reviewing a paper for an astrophysicist at Harvard, and he's doing some stuff on economics, and he's under the same agreement that the most effective means of energy from a safety perspective, a biosafety perspective over 100, 200 years, is solar. Because it doesn't have a thermal footprint, which nuclear and other fossil fuels and other things have,
right.
Which is so large.
And yet we still have goofy people out there who, saying, why solar? We've got plenty of coal. And
well, it's always good to have a diversity of opinions and well-thought-out arguments. And the good news is that solar's getting cheaper all the time. And so eventually it just becomes a simple economic argument where, hey,
So the last thing I'd like to ask is, you wrote somewhere I read, the nature of value is the economy of life. Can you close our interview with some words of wisdom for our listeners?
The economy long-term will continue to grow. Find and invest and allocate to stable things that contribute value to us all, and those will grow.
Like the sun.
Nice.
There we go.
I'm investing in the sun. Thank you so much.
All right.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us today on Bitcoins and Gravy, and we look forward to seeing what happens with SolarCoin and hopefully speaking with you again down the road.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. We really appreciate you being here.
All right. Take care. Bye.